Hey Colts fans, I'm JJ Stankevitz. Welcome into another episode of the Colts Show, an Indianapolis Colts podcast. Today, I had a chance to chat with Penn State head coach James Franklin. As you would expect, we talked all about Tyler Warren, the kind of person the Colts are getting, the kind of player the Colts are getting, all the crazy ways that Penn State was able to use him in their offense. Really good chat. I learned a lot from talking to James Franklin about him. And look, it was hard for me to not listen to this and feel excited about how the Colts can use him, how Shane Steichen can use Tyler Warren this upcoming season. I'm going to have the Mailbag, the Colts Show Mailbag, coming up after this chat with James Franklin, which we will get to right now here on the Colts Show. It is my pleasure to be welcomed here on the Colts Show by Penn State head coach James Franklin. Who better to dive into Tyler Warren with than the guy who's around him the most for the last 4 years. Coach, thanks for joining us here on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Obviously, getting a chance to talk about Tyler. You guys are going to love him, so appreciate the opportunity.
How transformative was Tyler for your program last year? I know, you guys had the highest finish in the college football playoff rankings, highest finish in the AP rankings in 20 years. I know it takes a whole team, obviously. Football's a team sport, but Tyler doing what he did with those 13 touchdowns and just maybe the gravitational effect he had on Penn State's offense, like how transformational was that last year?
Yeah, obviously, when you're in this type of situation and playing in the games that we're playing in, you got to get your best players the ball. And for us, it became very obvious, as the year went on, that any time we put Tyler in a position to make a play, he was going to make it. And whether that was as a receiver or whether that was running behind him, blocking, or whether that was him playing wildcat quarterback or quarterback sneaks or double passes or whatever it may be, we just found creative ways to get him the ball. And he really thrived and flourished in all of them. And I think the other point that you're making is also the stuff that people don't see just away from the media or away from the games on TV is the impact on his teammates in the locker room. I mean, Tyler's a high production and low maintenance guy. He said, I think in the 5 years that I was with him, I think he said like 17 words. And just a very appreciative, humble young man, got a great mom and dad. And has really just kind of thrived in so many different roles for us here at Penn State.
Something that really stood out to me when I had a chance to sit down with Tyler the day after he got drafted, and I asked him about the USC game, right? 17 catches, you break a school record, you win that game, and I was like, what's your maybe favorite memory from that game? And he said it was running onto the field with his teammates after the game-winning field goal. So it had nothing to do with him. His favorite memory was being on the sideline. And I think that speaks to, James, what you're talking about with Tyler and the kind of teammate he is. When you have a guy like that who is so productive but also has no personal ego, what does that do for a locker room?
Yeah, it sets the tone for everybody, right? When your best players are your hardest working guys and show the most humility, it's as a coach, you can't ask for a better scenario. It's hard for other people to maybe complain or not work as hard as they should be working when they see that Tyler's doing it, right? I would even use kind of an example with NIL that we're dealing with now in college football, and same there. Like, for him to come back last year in the discussions with NIL or leaving early for the draft and those types of things, it was not a difficult conversation. It was, what is Penn State going to do? Was really coming from us. What were we going to do for him and his family to feel like they could come back here and take that pressure off him and not worry about it and just make the best decision for his future? And it was pretty easy. It was pretty low maintenance because I think he does a great job of keeping the main thing, right? He wants to be a great teammate. He wants to help the organization win. A lot of guys say that in the interview process or in the draft process when they're sitting down with different teams, and they really just keep coming back to doing what it takes to win, doing what it takes to win. And some guys are saying that because their agents have trained them to say that. Tyler's saying it because he really means it.
When we're talking about Tyler going to the NFL now, he goes from a situation at Penn State where he's the focal point of your offense to now in the NFL, he's going to have to earn his way again. How does this attitude that we're talking about here benefit him as he now makes a transformation to being a teammate in an NFL locker room?
Well, I think it helps coming from a place like Penn State and coming from a tight end room at Penn State like we've had. Like one of the knocks people had early on is like, well, why did it take till this year for him to have this type of dominant season? How come this didn't happen before? Well, last year he shared time with a second round draft choice, Theo Johnson, who was playing for the Giants. He's been around high level players. He's played in big games. He's played in New Year's Six bowl games. He's been in the playoffs. So in some ways, up until this year, his role has been to be a role player in whatever the team needed on special teams, on offense, whatever it may be. He was willing and able to provide that. And even this year, like sometimes, like you say, okay, the USC game, he had 17 catches for like 256 yards or whatever it was. We never had a game later in the season, not once, where he was like, get me the ball, or I didn't get enough touches, or like he is not that guy. I saw one interview where he said, if I got to block and have no catches in a game, or if I got to have 17 catches in a game to win, I'm comfortable with either. And again, that's not draft talk. Like, he means that. He truly means that. There wasn't one time in 5 years with him where there was a complaint about not enough touches or not happy with how I'm being used in the offense. Not him, not his family, nothing. So I just think what you are seeing out of him in your brief interactions up to this point is truly who he is. It's not putting on a show and telling you what you want to hear.
How is he as a blocker?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. When you're 6'6" and you're 265 pounds, and there's enough film of watching him do that, he could be an inline Y, or he can be more of an H-back in terms of his production in the passing game. And to me, that's where tight ends are most valuable, is when they literally can do both. Like we've been one of the most productive teams in the country using the tight end, and I would get upset because they would give the tight end award every year in college football to a receiver. And what I mean by that is the guy may be in the program as a tight end, but he's not playing tight end. He's a big wide receiver.
Yeah, he's in the slot.
Correct. And when you're just a big wide receiver and not a threat in the running game as a blocker, then defenses will just treat you like that. They put you in packages. Well, this guy's essentially a wide receiver, so we'll put a safety on him, whether it's a big nickel or whatever it may be. But when you're able to line up out wide and be a threat in the passing game, but then motion into the box and be a real threat in the running game, that's when tight ends are most valuable, and that's when you hear about them being mismatches that drive defensive coordinators crazy.
That transition from college to the NFL, in terms of the physicality that is required out of tight ends to block, that seems to me to be like one of the steepest learning curves any rookie faces, maybe outside of quarterback. What about Tyler's just like willingness to be violent makes you believe he can make that transition, he can handle that learning curve as he gets into the NFL?
I think it's a little bit like what we just talked about. I think a lot of these schools and a lot of these tight ends aren't asked to do it. The guy that's winning the Mackey Award and he has 75 catches, and you can't find evidence of toughness on film. You can't find evidence of sticking his nose in there and wanting and trying to block. So I think what happens is you draft a tight end and you'd like him to play more of a traditional role. Well, you're asking him to do something he's never done. And we have the same issue when we recruit tight ends. A lot of the guys that we recruited at tight end didn't play tight end in high school. They were wide receivers. Tyler was a quarterback. Mm-hmm. So that's the challenge, right? Why is it such a steep curve? It's such a steep curve because they have to block these massive athletic freakazoids in the NFL. That's part of it. But the other thing is you're asking a guy to do something that you didn't really see a ton of evidence on tape, and you just say, well, I'm gonna coach him. Well, the sticking your nose in there and that toughness with tight elbows and running your feet and having a nasty demeanor and disposition to finish people, that's hard to create if a guy hasn't done it in high school or college, and now you want him to fill that role in the NFL. I think in some ways it's unrealistic. So with Tyler, that's not a problem. He's been doing those things now for 5 years at Penn State, and this is just going to be an extension of what the Colts are going to ask him to do.
You mentioned Tyler being a quarterback when he was being recruited. Was the first time you saw Tyler as a quarterback or dunking a basketball?
What do you mean the first time I saw him?
Like when he came across your desk as a recruit, and your staff was like, hey, there's this kid, he's committed to Virginia Tech. Because I saw that he kind of got out there more as a tight end prospect because of his basketball highlights.
Yeah, I think that was more specific to Penn State. So to your point, he was committed to Virginia Tech as a quarterback. Once he started to realize that probably his future was not at quarterback and was going to be more at tight end, that's when things changed. But the reality is it's not like he got out there as a recruit, as a tight end, because as soon as he decided he wanted to do that and had sent us his basketball highlights, which to your point was a huge part of our evaluation. Even when I went and watched him play in person, like he's one of these guys in every game, he'd have like 5 to 7 dunks in every game, alley-oops, whatever it may be. So that was a big part of our evaluation in him translating to the tight end position. But then once we decided we wanted him as a tight end and he wanted to play tight end, then he committed pretty quickly to Penn State, and it went from there. Then it was, hey, we're going to spend a lot of time, especially your first couple years of the run game, of spend a ton of time in the run game, because that was the thing he had not done a whole lot of. So I'm all over my tight ends coach, Ty Howell, who does an unbelievable job, best tight ends coach in college football. But I'm all over him, reminding him that, hey, in your individual drills, the majority of your individual drills need to be in blocking, because most of the tight ends that we recruit don't have a real background in that. We need to get them ready for it.
So you went and saw him play basketball in person?
Yes.
I'm sure you also went and saw him play football too, right? But like the basketball part of it, that's really interesting, because like you see guys, you think about like Antonio Gates and Jimmy Graham in the NFL. We got a guy here, Mo Alley-Cox, who started at Virginia Commonwealth at basketball. What are you looking for? Like when you were like, okay, I want to go see this guy play basketball, are you looking for that explosiveness out of him in terms of the dunks? Like what are you trying to scout there?
Yeah, so that's probably more common than you think. Like, so for example, I don't think I ever went and saw him play football in person.
Okay.
That was all on videotape and things like that. The basketball, it's more just the time of it. Once our season ends, then we're able to go out on the road recruiting, and that's when, if they're playing multiple sports, that's when you get a chance to watch them play other sports, whether it's wrestling or basketball or whatever it is. So just our recruiting calendar, the way it falls, that's when you are able to do that. But yeah, when you watched his basketball tape combined with his football tape, and then when I went and watched him play in person, like when they send you the highlight tape and it shows him shooting a three, we could care less about you shooting a three, right? We want to see you block shots. We want to see you dunk. We want to see you change direction. We want to see you move your feet. That's what we're really looking for. Like, it's amazing how many football players in their highlight have them shooting threes and stuff. We don't really care about that. We want to see the explosive athletic movements that will translate to football.
When did you realize that Tyler could take on the responsibilities that you and your coaching staff put on him last year?
Well, so I think a couple things. He had really had a nice career at Penn State. 2 years ago, from the information we were getting from scouts and GMs, he was going to be a third or fourth round draft choice. And when Theo decided to come out early, our discussion at that point was, hey, Tyler, you got a chance now to be the tight end, not splitting time or reps. And now also have a chance to be more of a focal point in offense. I mean, if you look at the tight end production he put up the year before with 2 tight ends, it was easy to kind of make the argument, hey, if you're not splitting his time, all these reps and all these opportunities are going to go to you. And as the season went on, just game after game, he just continued to make clutch plays, contested catches. The other thing is, with him being 6'6", sometimes he doesn't look like he's running, but like people can't tackle him. Like against Ohio State, he takes a wildcat play and is running a power, and he bounces and gets to the edge and outruns Ohio State down the sideline. So like he just found so many different ways to make plays, and we had used him in some of these ways the year before as a wildcat quarterback, but just the more times we could get the ball into his hands, good things happened.
How does that speak to his football IQ, that you were able to put so much on his plate and he was able to handle it so successfully?
Yeah, I think that's where his background as a quarterback helps, not only with football IQ, but also being able to do a cadence from the gun that everybody on the offense is comfortable with. God forbid get under center and take a snap. You can't get quarterbacks to do that now, let alone a tight end. Now you can run a quarterback sneak with him, and he's 6'6", 265 pounds running the quarterback sneak, and then all the complementary things off that. So his football IQ allowed that, but also just his background in doing some of these things. Whenever you run wildcat quarterback, the when it becomes the most effective is when that guy can actually throw the ball. So they just can't say, we're going to overload the box. Well, we could do enough with Tyler that he could throw the ball that now the defense had to have some concern about that as well. So all these things, football IQ, a wide variety of skills that he has, that's what made him so valuable, and one of the cooler, what I would think one of the cooler tapes to watch for NFL teams from the feedback I got, as well as media people like yourself. It was interesting. I listened to one interview where someone was almost like using it as a negative. Well, he was just used in so many gimmicky ways at Penn State. Well, because the guy was such a playmaker, we were finding different ways to get him the ball, and he was able to execute all of them at a high level. So I didn't really understand that take that was out there, but to me, that just speaks volumes about kind of his wide variety of skills.
Last one for you here, Coach. During the pre-draft process, when teams called you and they're asking you about Tyler, what thing did you maybe find yourself repeating the most about him to, pitch him as, yes, what you see on tape, this is a special kid. He is absolutely worth being a high draft pick?
Well, when you're a CEO or head coach or leader of any organization, you can't have enough people that are high production and low maintenance, number one. And he's like the poster boy for high production and low maintenance. The other thing is, I think the point we already talked about was he is a true tight end that can line up in the traditional Y or line up outside or motion back in. So he's a true tight end in my mind that can play Y or the H-back position. And there's value in that. Now, some teams more than others value and use their tight ends that way. So that was probably the second thing. And then the third thing that I said to people is he's a throwback. He could play now. He could have played in the 90s. He could have played in the 80s. He could have played in the 70s. Not only as a player in terms of skills and how they were used and the toughness, but also in the locker room. He's a man's man. He's universally respected by the staff and his teammates. So he's a throwback in a lot of ways. And to me, again, you just can't have enough guys like that in your locker room that are going to be high production and low maintenance.
That's awesome. James Franklin, head coach at Penn State. Good luck this season. Thanks for joining me here on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
All right, back here on the Colts Show. Before the Colts Show mailbag, just a real quick word on the status of Anthony Richardson. He did not participate in veteran minicamp this week. I'm sure everyone listening and watching already knows that. We'll see what his timeline is come training camp. That's all kind of to be determined, but right now, it was a lot of Daniel Jones this week. So we'll kind of just monitor that when we get closer to that July 22nd report day for veterans up in Grand Park for Colts training camp. Not a whole lot else to talk about with that right now. We'll have plenty more time to discuss that, the status of Anthony Richardson, what it means for the quarterback competition when we get into training camp. But I do want to get to the Colts Show mailbag today because I got a really just good question and something I wanted to talk about here for a little while. This is from Jim Williams from Marion, Indiana. He writes, "It's fair to say that Chris Ballard spent some money to acquire defensive players to shore up some of the weaknesses of our defense. Can the Colts defense be a force in the league now that Lou Anarumo is the new coordinator?" And I think that the tying in, it's the veterans that were brought in with the existing players on this defense. And this is a good question because I've been, you kind of hear this all the time of like, well, Lou Anarumo had a very, experienced veteran defense in Cincinnati. And when he had that, those defenses that the Bengals had were very good. In 2022, they were 5th in points allowed in the NFL. Now, they tapered off a little bit in 23 and 24, but that was with a lot of roster turnover where, you lost Jesse Bates, you lost Von Bell at safety, you lost Chidobe Awuzie at corner, and you were trying to replace a lot of these guys. You lost DJ Reader at defensive tackle. You're trying to replace these guys with younger players. And maybe Lou Anarumo's, the way that he wants to play defense, which is very complex, it's very tailored to the opponent on a week-to-week basis. You got to know how to play every single coverage, every single defensive front. Maybe that's better for veteran, more experienced players. So I went back and I looked in 2022 when that was the best year of the Bengals defense statistically. If you go back and look at it again, they were 5th in points allowed. They're really high up there in a lot of statistical categories. Their defense that year was a huge driver of their success coming off making the Super Bowl. So I went back and I looked at just like how many games the guys on that defense, the key guys on that defense had played in their career. So I looked at 12 players that year who saw significant time on defense. That would be Trey Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard, B.J. Hill, DJ Reader. That was their defensive line, the main 4 guys there. At linebacker, Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson. And then they had a bunch of corners play quite a bit of time. Cam Taylor-Britt, Chidobe Awuzie, Mike Hilton, and Eli Apple. Then at safety, Jesse Bates III and Von Bell. So those 12 guys averaged in their careers, this is with a rookie in there, and Cam Taylor-Britt, they averaged coming into that season 57.5 games of experience. So you think about over 17 games, that's about 3+ years of experience. Some of those guys were going back to the 16-game schedule in 2020 and prior to that. So they had about, almost 60 games of experience. If you take out Cam Taylor-Britt, those guys had 62.7 average games of experience. The least experienced guys in that defense were Cam Taylor-Britt, who was a second-round pick that year, rookie, and then the 2 linebackers, Pratt and Wilson, who had 39 and 25 games of experience, respectively. So again, a very veteran defense, especially in the back end, with guys like Awuzie, Hilton, Bates, Apple, all those guys. So remember that those 2 numbers there. We're going to just focus on the one with the rookies at 57.5. So that was the average number of games of experience the 2022 Bengals had in their career before that season. Let's look at the 2025 Colts now. So I pulled, it's hard to tell who exactly is going to start at some positions. We don't know who might have a role, who might not have a role, whatever it might be, whose role is going to be bigger. But I just pulled 16 guys who could very well have a significant role on this team this year. So I looked at Laiatu Latu, Taekwon Lewis, Kwity Paye, Samson Ebukam, DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, Zaire Franklin, Kenny Moore II, Jalen Jones, Charvarius Ward, Cam Bynum, Nick Cross, Jalen Carlisle, Shegu Alubi, Justin Wally, JT Tuimoloau. So, look, I could have thrown in Juju Brentson there. Don't really know what the cornerback competition is going to look like. Don't really know what that linebacker spot opposite Zaire is going to be, whether it's Carlisle, whether it's Alubi, but just a general look at these guys. So including Wally and Tuimoloau, those 16 players bring 58 games of experience on average to the Colts this season. That is right in line with the 57.5 that the Bengals had in 2022. Now, that doesn't mean that all games of experience are not created equal, right? Some could be on special teams. Some you could have had a really bad game. Some you're a rookie just figuring it out, whatever it might be. But I think the point is this is a veteran defense, especially in the back end. When you look at Kenny Moore, 117 career games. Charvarius Ward, 102 career games. Cam Bynum, 65 career games. Even Nick Cross, he's at 50 career games. Jalen Jones, even though he's a 2023 draft pick, he's appeared in 34 games. He hasn't missed a game in his career. So you've got some vets back there. You got guys with experience, and I think that does lend itself to Lou Anarumo playing defense and calling defense the way that he probably wants to, which is very intricate. He's going to disguise stuff. He's going to throw different looks on different downs that you might not expect if he has an experienced and smart defense. And it's not just that these Colts players are experienced, but they're smart. And I think that's going to lend itself to them being able to do some different things. Also, Justin Wally, I asked Shane Steichen a pretty basic question on Thursday of last week about just how the defense has kind of been taken to Lou Anarumo. And he started talking a little bit, and then he brought up Justin Wally specifically. He was the only player he brought up in the answer. And I know a lot of other people in the room, their ears kind of perked up, like, oh, okay, tell me more about Justin Wally. And everything I've heard is that he's been awesome so far during OTAs and now minicamp. So we'll see. Pad's still got to go in training camp. That's an adjustment. Game action in the NFL is an adjustment, but early returns on Justin Wally really, really encouraging, it sounds like. So we'll see kind of how that all plays out. But to answer Jim's question, I do think there's a chance that if this defense comes together the way that Lou Anarumo envisions it, this could be a really good defense, and it could be something that maybe sets a pretty high floor for what the 2025 Colts can be in terms of their record. Again, the ceiling could be based on their offense. We'll see. And we'll see where that goes, whether it's Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson, whoever's going to be the starting quarterback. Again, we'll figure that out in training camp. We'll figure out how, if Anthony Richardson is behind at all in training camp, or if he can get going early into camp, at the start of camp, whatever it might be. All Shane Steichen told us was that he would be back at some point during training camp. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Colts Show. Really excited for the next 2 episodes to bring to everyone. I had a chance to talk to a number of players. I think the final total was 13 during our media content shoot that happened earlier this month. So you're going to see in the next 2 episodes, and you're going to hear players coming through. I kind of peppered them with some questions, a lot about the Pacers. We talked a ton about the Pacers' run to the NBA Finals and what the impact that has been on the city, on what they have seen out of the city. And a lot of players all told me, look, seeing what the Pacers have been doing has really been motivating for us to, hey, we got to pick it up once the fall rolls around. We don't want to be left behind with the Pacers having this incredible season. So let's see if I can remember all the players off the top of my head. I had a chance to talk to Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. I talked with Alec Pierce, Ashton Doolin. I talked with DeForest Buckner. Grover Stewart came by, as you would expect. Neville Gallimore. Neville Gallimore was awesome. I loved talking to Neville Gallimore. You're going to really enjoy that one. That's on the first episode that's going to come out. Got Neville Gallimore. Kwity Paye came by. I had Kenny Moore II come by. Cam Bynum came by. He was awesome, talking about training with Manny Pacquiao this offseason. Really fascinating stuff there. If I'm forgetting anyone, you'll see in the episode when they come on by. Jalen Jones was the other guy, and Shegu Alubi. So those 2 other guys right there. Anyways, those 2 episodes are going to be coming out next Thursday, and then the Thursday after that here among the Indianapolis Colts podcast offerings. Again, I'm JJ Stankevitz. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of The Colts Show. If you've made it this far, please give us a 5-star review. Please like and subscribe to us on YouTube and give us some good feedback on what you like, what you maybe don't like about these episodes. We do read all of your comments. All right. Anyways, that's going to do it for this episode of The Colts Show. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Talk to you next week. So long.